Welcome to the American Sentinel. My name is Patty Ramsey. This is a different show today. This is a show that I'm going to be more intimate with you about. I'm not wearing a suit. There is no comedy. There is no gimmick. This is a bit of an emergency broadcast. This is a bit of me asking you on the right and on the left and whoever you may be, wherever you may reside, whatever you may believe, to cast aside any predisposed notions that you may have and listen to me and listen to your neighbor about this. Listen to the people around you about this. We're going to talk today about the issue, the subject of segregation, the Civil Rights Act. Most white Americans on the right wing, if asked and polled in private, will tell you straight up, I want immigration. I want an end to immigration. I want an immigration moratorium. America has had enough of people who don't look like me, who don't worship like me, who don't believe like me, speaking strange languages, praying to strange gods, shitting in the street, being violent, forming gangs. There is no phenotype consensus between the natives. And by the way, you say, you're not a Native American. But if you saw the opening flag, if you saw this flag, this was a flag used by the Know-Nothings. You may have saw that flag be made famous in a movie called The Gangs of New York by a man named Bill the Butcher. And he called himself a native. And there was nothing wrong with calling yourself a native back then. We had political correctness. This is post Alexander Hamilton. This is post the Federalist Papers. This is well into the 1860s, right at the Civil War time. And political correctness did exist in some form back then. And we referred to the American Indians as American Indians, because calling them Indians wasn't as politically correct as calling them American Indians. And to refer to yourself as a native or a nativist, like you can see on the flag. I am a native. Some of us, like on my wife's side of the family, have been here longer than my side of the family. My wife's mom, even though my wife is half Italian, her dad is Italian, my wife's mom has been in the hills of Virginia since the Mayflower days. She came on, some of her family came, the ship after the Mayflower called the Speedwell. And they've been in Virginia since the 15 and 1600s. Some of my Scots-Irish ancestry that left Derry and came to Philadelphia and then immigrated into the mountains of Appalachia have been in these very mountains since the 1700s, since before there was ever an America, since there was only American colonies, since we couldn't get along with the British in Ireland, we couldn't get along with them in Scotland, we couldn't get along with them in America. And that's why the logo of our people and the logos of our people, the Scots-Irish, is born fighting, because we've always been fighting for years and years. And I bring all that up to say that some of us have had enough. When we look at the founding stock of this country and we see that there is a delineation, a degraduation from what our ancestors expected for this country that they were going to build for their offspring, this time of post-American revolutionary decadence where everything was possible because we had just defeated the greatest standing army, the greatest floating navy in the world, and there was a spirit of 1776 that was like nothing the world has ever seen. It was the flower that had bloomed. It was the accumulation and the culmination of everything that came out of the Renaissance and bloomed into this flower of red, white, and blue liberty that we called America. And it was free white men of good moral character. Do you know how I know that it was free white men of good moral character? Because the pre-Constitution documents, specifically the ones relating to immigration, specifically called out those terms. We will accept free white men, a multitude of free white men of good moral character, so long as America maintains an 80% white majority. That's what it said. Those are the exact words. If you don't believe it, you can go look at the Confederation of States papers. You can go look at the Pre-Federalist papers. You can go look at the Pre-Constitutionalist papers. And I don't think our founding fathers would be very happy if they see that all of Chicago is being taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and the New York that Alexander Hamilton fled to from the Caribbean to work under George Washington and start his law practice and create the Secretary Treasury, become the Secretary Treasury. I don't think that Alexander Hamilton, who by the way was probably America's first liberal, I don't think that Alexander Hamilton, as much as he was an abolitionist, would look at today's America and say, this is the America that I had envisioned when I went to war against the British. This is the America that I wanted for my offspring. I know Thomas Jefferson wouldn't have wanted it. I know that George Washington would not have wanted it, and I for fuck sure know that Old Hickory, Andrew Jackson, who got up off his deathbed to put down an Indian rebellion long after he was president, long after he had been shot, what had been rumored over 20 times, long after he was known as the Great War of 1812 general, because he believed in this European spirit. He believed that although we were a free country of free men, now that America was an extension of Europe. His parents, his lineage was from the same place that mine was, Northern Ireland. So many Northern Irish people settled in Tennessee and Kentucky and Virginia, like Sam Houston, the first governor of Texas and the president of the Republic of Texas, who was born right up in the mountains of Virginia and raised in the hills of Tennessee here. A school teacher, a military general, a scholar, adopted by the Cherokee people, married a Cherokee wife. And I wonder about all these people. I wonder about all these people who called themselves Native Americans because their lineage had been here for so long. You think George Washington was a British man? He fought for the British Army during the French and Indian War, or as they call it over there, the 7 Years' War. But he wasn't born in England. He wasn't of a father who was born in England. Even his grandfather wasn't born in England. They were Virginians. So Virginia was his country, if that makes sense to you, because there was no America at that point. And so I call myself a native. I call myself a Native American, or an American native, because when I have had family in this country since the 1700s, and my wife has had family on her mom's side in this country since the 1600s, and we really have nowhere else to go. We really have nowhere else to go. What, am I going to file a visa on behalf of my one Irish grandparent, my grandmother's dad, and say, oh, I'm going back to live in County Derry, which, by the way, has already been filled up with immigrants as well from Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, India, shitting on the streets, raping women, calling to prayer, Allahu Akbar, in the middle of the fucking morning, trying to fight. Imagine this Irish culture where you work all week long. You work your ass off all week long. But on Friday you cut loose. You go to the pub with your mates and you have it out. You have a good piss, as they say. And then Saturday morning rolls around and you sleep late and you get up and have a full fry up. Well, go to the pub and have your full fry up this fucking Saturday morning, as they say. That means eggs and beans and bacon. Bacon is different over there, and tomato, and all this white pudding, which is like a sausage, and black pudding. But instead of being able to sleep late and work your hangover off with the little hair of the dog, you get a call to prayer by an IQ 75 Somalian who wants to scream, Allahu Akbar. And the liberals go, oh, it's so beautiful. It's a beautiful religion. Until your daughter gets raped, until your son gets beheaded, like that beautiful Anglo-Saxon English soldier who was beheaded on the streets of London for no reason and his head was carried around like a trophy. by some retarded sub-IQ African who just hopped off of a boat. He held up that man's head like he had caught it out of a river in Montana with a fly rod, like it was a trophy to hold up to Mohammed. And here in America, immigration is only one aspect of it. What's the name of this show today? Segregation. Do we need it? I can tell you now, with my whole heart, that we need it. That we have to demand it. That we have to demand a repeal, an immediate repeal of the Civil Rights Act. Because why? Some Republicans, like Charlie Kirk, not to besmirch the dead, Tucker Carlson, Matt Gaetz, all the neocons, they say, I don't care what color you are. I just want you to work hard, fit in, and do good and adhere to American values. I don't care who you worship, who you love, or what you do. I do. Because I have an identity that goes back further. Than you can imagine in this country. Hundreds of years. I have an identity to uphold. I have an identity that was brought over from the Highlands of Scotland and the plantations of Ulster, Northern Ireland, and was born fighting and looked like me and talked like me and had blonde hair and red hair and brown hair and icy blue eyes and forest green eyes and white skin and innovation and ingenuousness, and it wasn't a colorblind meritocracy. And some people never, ever, ever align with the current culture. The American Indian never aligned with the culture. They were here before us. The African American has been here since the late 1500s, some say, early 1600s. 400 years they've been here. And they've never assimilated. They don't look like us. They don't speak like us. They don't behave like us. And this colorblind meritocracy, this, as long as you work hard, pay your taxes, be a good citizen, let the chips fall where they may. It doesn't work anymore. Because all men are not created equal in the eyes of science, in the eyes of ambition, in the eyes of genealogy. When those words were created, what they should have said was all men were created equal under the law, because that was the truest of preference. That was the truest of meaning. That all men who are free possess the same rights to liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness, which I believe in that 100%. But all men are not created equal. Don't believe me? Go to the NICU. Some babies are born without hands. Some babies are born without the ability to see or speak or hear. Genealogically, biologically, epigenetically, we are not created equally. And to say, I believe in a colorblind meritocracy where the chips may fall wherever they may, as long as you work hard, pay your taxes, and be a good citizen, you can be an American. I don't believe like that. Because we've allowed that now for so long. And what you've seen is malicious envy of white people. Black people have had a malicious envy of us for as long as they've been here. And some of it is understandable because they've been given an unfair hand. But some black people, 50% to be exact, in America, came in from the Caribbean, Jamaica, Aruba, Africa, Haiti. They are post-Civil War immigrants to this country. And they were not dealt any kind of bad hand by the 3% of American slave owners who lived in 3% of the South, but yet all of America fought for in 1860. They had no justification for claiming slavery. They had no justification for saying that they had been besmirched against in their rights. And they still refused to assimilate. They refused to lay down this mantle of recreational offendment, if that is a word, recreational offense, meaning They become recreationally offended at everything you say. Oh, cause I'm black, you saying that I can't do? Okay, so cause I'm a black female, I can't have two machines at the gym at Planet Fitness. Yes, I am working out on both of these at the same time. I'm alternating. Like, oh my God, I can't vape on the airplane. It's not even cigarettes, it's weed. And more, what you see is this malicious envy because they don't achieve like us. They don't have the same work ethic as us. They don't have the same ability to understand and comprehend as us, for the most part. There are exceptions to that. But I'm talking about the law, not the exception to the law. And I'm not here to besmirch anybody. I'm not here to cast aspersions on any one race or the other. But I'm saying, as long as there is this malicious envy, and as long as white people can turn on the TV every single night and see violence against them that is upheld by a political system that hates them, that is bought off by a tiny Jewish nation that wants to see them replaced, the youth of this nation that has not been programmed by Fox News and CNN are waking up. And what you are going to breed is not the Generation Z, not the Zoomers who were smart enough to look around and go, dude, I want to live in peace where we start fucking looking towards space exploration and not fucking shooting each other with Glock switches and fucking Cardi B talking to the president of the United States about sucking dick and wet ass pussy. And don't suck dick after you done ate a bacon, egg, and cheese and let a nigga fuck you, cause you gonna get that bacon, egg, and cheese up in your pussy. This is subhuman dialect. This is subhuman conversation. And this is an actual conversation that Cardi B had while being platformed by the White House under the Biden administration. Don't believe me? Look it up. It was a talk about health and hygiene for the black woman in America. And it sounds joking. And it sounds like I'm trying to be comical. But I promise you on this show tonight, I am not being comical. I am not casting any comedic relief. And because I don't want you to take anything that I say the wrong way, I don't have any guns, no firearms, no ammunition behind me tonight. We usually play this game on the show where, what does Patty Ramsey have on the shelf tonight? What does Patty Ramsey? Is there a Glock up there? Is there a SIG? Is there a 1911? I don't want you to misinterpret anything I've said today, so I've taken all the guns, all the ammo, everything off the shelf. Because what I'm going to read to you next, some viewers may find upsetting. Some viewers may find horrifying. But like I was saying before I get to that, I want to just say, I want to finish my statement that if we don't correct this problem of segregation, of letting white people form their own intentional communities, releasing white people from the burden of segregation and the burden of the Civil Rights Act. And by the way, if it was so popular, then why was it forced at gunpoint? Why were 30,000 U.S. troops, 31,000 U.S. troops, soldiers with M14s sent to these colleges and universities in the South to make white people accept black people? Access to white people is not a privilege. It is not a right. It is not a guarantee. And it must be rescinded expeditiously if we as a human race are ever going to ascend to the stars, ascend to our true destiny. What I'm about to read to you is a manifesto of a man named Dylan Roof. And I read this to you, and like I said before, I am reading this to you as a preventative action, as a corrective and preventative action, so that we do not have another situation like we had in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, in that summer. Most of you have heard about Dylan Roof. Most of you know who he is. Most of you know what he did. But most of you have never heard him speak. Most of you have never heard his own words. Most of you have never read the book that he's written from prison. Most of you just know what was given to you by the mainstream newspapers, talk shows and TV stations. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to sit back and let you take a Jewish-ran media psyop television network's word for something when you should hear it for yourself. And again, I don't want to glorify this. I believe those people that were murdered in that church in Charleston, South Carolina, were innocent people, no matter what color skin they were. And I don't promote violence. And I wish to lean away from violence. I wish to lean away from doing harm to others. But if we don't repeal this Segregation Act, if we don't repeal the Civil Rights Act, we are going to have a whole generation, not just of Gen Z people who want segregation, but of the next generation, the Generation Alpha, who are going to be Dylan Roofs because they are going to have no choice. Dylan Roof did what he did because he felt as if he had no choice. Don't believe me? Then let's listen to his own words. Again, this is not an endorsement of his actions. Again, I don't condone violence. Again, because of this message, there is nothing encoded here. I don't have any guns behind me like I usually do on the show. I'm not promoting this man. I'm not promoting what he said. I am simply telling you that if we don't use this as a cautionary tale, then the people who want to see this nation destroyed so that they can erect the third temple and become the center of holiness and legality in the planet Earth are going to succeed, and they may do it no matter what. I'm going to read from you part of the manifesto from Dylan Roof. And before I do, I want you to know that this is all handwritten. So if you hear me stumbling over the words or maybe doing some recitations of the words, please know that it's a little bit hard to get through. As you can see here, it is all handwritten, and was all written from prison. As you see there, there's the rune, the swastika symbol, and the Lebensrune, and the Weißkleidensrune, which is, if you don't know what that is, and it's a white power symbol that comes from ancient Nordic runes. Runes are an alphabet. And this is called the Last Rhodesian. And if you don't know what Rhodesia is a country that occupied just the territory just north of South Africa, in Africa. And today it's modern-day Zimbabwe. And it was a land that was prosperous. It was a land that was a utopia, really, on planet Earth. It was a Garden of Eden. It was a British colony that the British had taken and created skyscrapers and cities and dams and hydroelectric electricity, and really created a beautiful place to habitat, to be in, to habitate. And Britain stopped. They went through their anti-colonialist period after they were infiltrated by the Jews. And of course, this was all by design. We see it now. Decolonialize and let everybody come back to Britain on the Home Rule Act, on the Empire Act. That's why you see the streets of England filled with shitting Pajeets, destroying the streets, and Somalis and Pakistanis raping people. But in Rhodesia, and for those of you just joining, this is a manifesto from Dylan Roof. And we're going to read it in a minute. But before we go into that, I was letting the audience know that it is called the Last Rhodesian. And Rhodesia is a country in South Africa previously owned by England, an extension of England where they had literal paradise on earth. They had everything they ever needed and wanted, and it was beautiful. And when they lost it to the Africans, I want to say when they gave it back, England gave it back, and a few Rhodesian people stayed there, and they fought. And they were raped and murdered and hung with piano wire, and they fought to the very end, and they almost won. A handful of them almost beat a four-sided army. And if you want to look it up in the history of Ian Smith, the president, who was a former SAS officer, and how he led that country to an almost victory and reclaimed Rhodesian independence. It actually did in the Rhodesian Bush Wars for a temporary period, but he ended up being overtaken. And what happened to Rhodesia after that? Well, I was just in South Africa not too long ago, and you could see the Zimbabwean people. They're starving to death. There's cannibalism again. The money is worthless. They take wheelbarrows of money to the store to buy bread. It is the result of what happens when you delineate an identity and culture and border of a people and give it to someone else with the best of intentions that they will assimilate and that they will course correct, when in fact they almost never do. This is called The Last Rhodesian, which is a manifesto written by a young man named Dylan Roof. If you don't know who Dylan Roof is, I will tell you that he is a white supremacist labeled by the FBI as a terrorist who walked in one summer day to a church group in Charleston, South Carolina, and he shot dead 9 people. I won't say for no reason, because he believed there was a reason, but for no good cause. Innocent people who didn't deserve it. And again, I'm prefacing reading this by saying I'm only reading it as a corrective and preventative action to keep our youth from making the same mistake that he made. Because, by the way, he's rotting in a prison now. He'll never see the light of day. He'll never hug his parents again. He will be branded the worst type of terrorism, a white supremacist terrorist. Let me move my computer stuff over just a minute. My name is Dylan Roof. I was born on the 3rd of April, 1994 in Columbia, South Carolina. I was not raised in a racist home or environment. Living in the South, almost every white person has a small amount of racial awareness, simply because of the numbers of Negroes in this part of the country. But it is superficial awareness. Growing up in school, the whites and the black kids would make racial jokes towards each other. But that's all. That's all it was. Just jokes. Me and my white friends would sometimes watch American History X or some videos online of black nationalists talking about killing white people. But there was no real understanding behind it. The event that truly awakened me was the Trayvon Martin case. I kept hearing and seeing his name, and eventually I decided to look. I decided to look him up, and I read the Wikipedia article, and right away I was unable to understand what the big deal was. It was obvious that Zimmerman was in the right. But more importantly, this prompted me to type in the words black on white crime into Google, and I was never the same since. Let's pause for a minute. How many of our young people are being radicalized, as the left would call them, or awoken, as the right would call them, by just opening their eyes and noticing what's around them? Just noticing. I typed the words black on white crime into Google, and I was never the same since. The first website I came across was the Council of Conservative Citizens. There were pages upon pages of these brutal, disgusting black on white murders. I was in disbelief. At this moment, I realized that something was very, very wrong. How could the news be blowing this Trayvon Martin case up while hundreds of these black on white murderers got no airtime? From this point on, I researched deeper and found out what was happening in Europe. I saw the same things were happening. in England, in France. Again, I could not believe it. I couldn't believe my eyes. As an American, you are taught to accept living in the melting pot, and that blacks and other minorities have just as much right to be here, since we are all immigrants, or the sons of immigrants. But Europe is the homeland of white people, and in many ways, the situation is even worse there. Worse there from here. I found out about the Jewish problem and other issues facing the white race today. I can say with confidence that I am completely racially aware. Blacks. I think it is fitting to start off with that group. I have the most real-life experience with them, and the group that is the biggest problem for Americans. He uses the word Nigger, but instead I'm going to say, for censorship purposes, and because as much as I am whatever you think I am, I still believe that everyone is ensouled by God, and it is not my position here to offend, besmirch, or berate somebody just for the station that they were born in. So I don't use that word. So instead, I'm going to say ninjas. Ninjas are stupid and violent. At the same time, they are very sick and conniving. Black people view everything through a racial lens. They are always thinking about the fact that they are black. This is part of the reason they get offended so easily and think that some things are racist, even when a white person wouldn't even be thinking about being racist or race in general. And this is part of our problem. Black people are racially aware, almost from birth, but white people on average don't think about race in their day-to-day. But we need to, he states. We need to. That is what racial awareness is. It is viewing everything that happens through a racial lens. Now, say you were to witness a dog being beaten by a man. You would almost surely going to feel very sorry for that dog. But say you were to witness a man being bit by a dog. You will most likely not feel the same pity you felt for the dog, for the man. Why? Because dogs are lower than men. This same analogy applies to ninjas. Even today, blacks are viewed as lower beings by white people on a subconscious level. And this is why we continue to feel sorry for them, for no real reason. Blacks are held to a lower standard in general. This is why they are able to get away with things like obnoxious behavior in public, because it's expected. I wish that ninjas were treated terribly throughout history by whites, that every person had an ancestor who owned slaves, that segregation was as an evil and oppressive institution, and on so on and so on and so on. Because if it was, and if it was all true, it would make it so much easier for me to accept our current situation. But it isn't true. For those of you just tuning in to the program, and I see a lot of viewers are just now tuning in, we're reading the manifesto of Dylann Roof as a corrective and preventative measure to keep our country from violence and to move to let people assimilate how they see fit, to move to let people live and love and work and house themselves around people who they choose, so that we don't have a melting pot where we are melting incompatible chemicals and cause an explosion. Because if it was true, it would make it so much easier to accept for me. But it isn't true. None of it is. We are told to accept what is happening to us because of our ancestors is wrong. Our ancestors is wrongdoing. But it is all based on historical lies, exaggerations, and myths. I have I have tried and tried to think of reasons we deserve this. And I have only came back more irritated because there are no reasons. Only a fourth to a third of people in the South owned even one slave. Now I'm going to stop right here because, again, this is a handwritten note. This is a handwritten manifesto, as you can clearly see in the screen. And I just want to take a note here, a moment to say that during this part, he's written this in a book, like a scholastic notebook, and he's only written on the right side pages. And so in some of these he has footnotes. So I'm going to skip the footnotes to the end of the page and then read back to you. So it may sound a little bit jumpy. Only 1/3 to 1/4 of people in the South even own slaves. I'm sorry. Let me back that up. Only a fourth to a third of people in the South even owned one slave. Yet every white person in America is treated as if they had an ancestor that was a slave or a slave owner. This applies to people in states that slavery never even existed in, as well as people whose family immigrated after slavery and slavery was already dissolved. Segregation was not a bad thing. It was a defensive measure. Segregation did not exist to hold back ninjas. It existed to protect us from them. It existed to protect us from them. And I mean that in multiple ways. Not only did it protect us from having to interact with them, but it protected us from being brought down to their level. Integration has done nothing but bring white people down to the level of colored people. The best example of this is obviously the school system. Now white parents are forced to move to the suburbs to send their children to good schools, he puts in quotation marks. But what constitutes a good school, again in quotation marks? The fact is that how good a school is considered directly corresponding to how white it is. I hate with a passion the whole idea of the suburbs to me. It represents nothing but scared white people running. And that's what they are doing, running, because they are too weak and scared and brainwashed to fight. Why should white people have to flee the cities that they created, that their ancestors created for the security of the suburbs? Why are the suburbs secure? Because they are white. The pathetic part is that these white people that leave for the suburbs don't even admit to themselves why they want to move in the first place. They tell themselves it's for better schools or simply to live in a better, nicer neighborhood, but it is only, honestly, just a way to escape ninjas and other minorities. But what about white people that are left behind? What about the white children who, because of school zoning laws, are forced to go to a black school? That is 90% of blacks. Forced to go to a school that is 90% blacks. Do we really believe for 1 minute that white kid isn't going to be picked on for being white? Do we really think for 1 minute that he will be able to go one day without being called a white boy, quotation marks, by some ninja? And who is going to fight for him? And who is going to fight for him? Who is fighting for these white people forced to live among the ninjas? No one. But someone has to. Now let me pause there for a minute. And again, if you're very familiar with this manifesto, and you notice that I'm leaving out the side notes on the left-hand page, please, I'll get to those eventually. Maybe not in this show, but because we're getting short on time. But there are side notes here, and if you want to see this for yourself, just Google The Last Rhodesian. That's the name of this book. And there's only a few pages left. But I just want to say, as a kid who went to a predominantly black school for a while, it was hell. You literally had to fight every single day. You literally had to fight multiple of them every single day. And there was no way to win. There was no way to win. Because even if you win, you're going to get jumped by all of them, girls, boys, whatever. And I had been in fights with black people at a school called Chilhowee Intermediate School in East Knoxville, Tennessee. And you'd fight 3 or 4 of these blacks at a time. And black teachers would sit there and watch it, and timid white intern teachers right out of college would be biting their like, should we go over there and break it up, or and a big fat black teacher who I had would go, you want to break it up, go break it up then, but they getting theirs. Shit, I went to Georgia State, you know what I mean? I got my degree. Like, you think I'm gonna break my motherfucking nail to go over there and break it up? He shouldn't have said why he said it then. And that's how teachers talked when I was fighting, literally for my life in 3rd grade. So I know exactly where he comes from this. And if I wasn't absolved of some sense of malicious hatred by my Christianity, by being baptized in Holy Orthodox baptism, then I think I could have very easily went down this path when I was young. I think I very could have went down this path if I hadn't had good people like my father and mother placed around me to let me know that all things come to an end, and this too shall pass, and this is only a season in your life. And my dad told me one time, he goes, you'll look back at this time and you'll be thankful for it, because it made you tough. It made you realize that you could endure more than you realized you could endure. And that's the truth now, and I probably, looking back, wouldn't have traded it for anything. Let's continue. Anyone who thinks that white and black people look as different as we do on the outside, but are somehow magically the same on the inside, is delusional. How could our faces, skin, hair, and body structure all be different, but our brains be exactly the same? Let's pause. He's exactly right there. A man named Dr. Watson, the man who is responsible for mapping the human genome, who gave us human genome theory and epigenetics and won the Nobel Prize, he noted all this, and he noticed that the amygdala, which is the emotion control center and a portion of the limbic system of the brain, was much different in blacks than it was in whites. Whites are more process-oriented thinking, and blacks are more emotional thinking. And they both have their pros and cons. I'm not saying that we're better than them. I'm saying, look, black people are survivalist. Their emotion control, limbic system tells them when danger's coming. They get out, they go into fight and flight quicker than we do. We sit around and ask ourselves, we still process, should we flee this situation? If we do, we're going to look like racists, and then we get raped and stabbed and killed. So I'm just saying that there are differences, and that he is right. Negroes have, and again, I said I'd never say the N-word on here, and I don't consider Negro to be the N-word. I don't consider Negro to be a bad word, especially when you see the black Hebrew Israelites on the street saying the American Negro, the so-called American Negro. I heard Muhammad Ali say it my whole life growing up, and it is a very scientific way to refer to one of the three races, the original three races that existed on Earth: Mongoloid, Negroid, Caucasioid. Negroes have lower IQs, lower impulse control, and higher testosterone levels in general. These three things alone are a recipe for violent behavior. If scientists publish a paper on the differences between the races in the USA, he could expect to lose his job. Now pause. He's right there, because that already happened to Dr. Watson. Where were we? There are personality traits within families, so why not within races? When you go to a doctor, they will usually want a record of diseases within your familial history, yet we still deny the differences between the races. Some white nationalists support the idea of a Northwest front. I think this idea is stupid. Why should I, for example, give up the beauty and the history of my state to go live in the Northwest? If you don't know what the Northwest Front is, please go look it up. It's an intentional community. To me, the whole idea of just parallels. To me, the whole idea just parallels the concept of white people running to the suburbs. The whole idea is pathetic, and is just another way to run from the problem without facing it. Race war. I would love for there to be a race war. That's what he wrote. I want you to keep this in the back of your mind as we close this out, because most of you have never been in war. Most of you don't know what war looks like. And most of you have never studied war. I've studied war for the mass majority of my adult life, both as a hobby, both as when I took military science in the university I was in, as a class, and as an ROTC cadet. I've studied war as a passion, and I can tell you every single time, you think that there is a disinterested third party country lurking and looming in the shadows, they become very interested very quick. Don't believe me? France and England hated each other, and they weren't even at war. The American Revolution starts. France jumps in and helps us win. The American Civil War, England tried to back the South. North Vietnam, South Vietnam, that wasn't really a war that anybody cared about Vietnamese people winning. It was America versus Russia. Afghanistan and Russia, America's there looming and lurking in the shadows. And if America goes into a second civil war or a race war, there will be bodies on the streets. And let me tell you, you think because you play video games, these Generation Z people, these Zoomers think that they're going to shoot somebody and the body's going to fall to the ground. Somebody's going to come in your house, you're going to shoot them, their body's going to fall to the ground, maybe disappear, or you're going to loot them like in Fortnite or Call of Duty. And they never think that when the fighting's over, you're going to have to be the one to dispose of that human garbage. You're going to have to be the one to work hours either digging up a pit to put that body in, and all the other bodies from the Civil War, or burn them or stack them somewhere and let them decompose naturally while poisoning the wells and waters of the environments around them and polluting the environment. War is fucking nasty. You're going to sift through the people's blood and guts and shit that you just murdered for some glory. And this kid is delusional. In his book, he wrote, I would love for there to be a race war. I won't lie, I think about every white nationalist dreams of race war, even if they deny it. But I'm not sure we even need to have one. I'd really, again, this is handwritten. So some of these words are smudged together so much so that even the FBI didn't know what they said. So ideally, we could simply take control of the government and enact laws in order to get things under control. I would personally be content with reinstating segregation and punishing certain individuals as need be, although we would also need to put a forced sterilization program and deportation program in place at the same time. I have read hundreds of slave narratives from my state, and he was from the South in South Carolina, and only about 1 in 20 had even one negative thing to say. One narrative sticks out in my mind, where this old ex-slave recounts how the day his mistress died was one of the saddest days in his life. Many others, when asked about whippings, replied their masters never whipped his slaves, or that he didn't allow his slaves to be whipped. There's a side note here. I'm going to read this one. In a modern history class, it is always emphasized that when talking about bad things white people have done in history, the people were white. But when we learn about the numerous, almost countless wonderful things whites have done, it is never pointed out that those people were white. Yet, when we learn about anything important a black person did in history, it is always pointed out repeatedly that they were black. For example, when we learn about how George Washington Carver was the first ninja smart enough to open a peanut. There is some other writing here, but it looks like it was erased, and I really can't see it. I have noticed that one of the things, and again, this is all over the place, this is handwritten. It gets really convoluted at this point. I've noticed that one of the things racially aware white men seem to have the most is race-mixing white women. We seem to hate the most is race-mixing white women. I personally don't understand this. These people seem to place the blame only on the white women without thinking about what causes them to do it. In my eyes, these women are nothing but victims. They are victims of the Jews and their media telling them that not only is this okay to race mix, it is cool. Then, more times than not, they end up being victims of domestic abuse at the hands of their black lovers. I don't think these women should be killed or even punished so long as they repent. They are not beyond saving. I personally wouldn't want to have relations with one of them as they are damaged goods. The Jews. I think, excuse me, the Jews. Unlike many white nationalists, I am of the opinion that the vast majority of American and European Jews are white. In my opinion, the issue with Jews is not their blood, but their identity. I think that if we could somehow destroy the Jewish identity, then they would cause a problem. The problem is that Jews look white, and in many cases are white, yet they see themselves as minorities just like ninjas. Most Jews are always aware and constantly thinking about the fact that they are Jewish. The other issue is that Jews network. Because Jews are always thinking about being Jewish, much of the time they feel like outsiders, even when no one treats them that way. I think this is part of the reason they feel guilty for the disgusting things that they do. If we could somehow turn every Jew blue for 24 hours, I think that people would be able to see what is going on. What I mean by that is that one of the main reasons Jews are able to get away with the things that they do is that people don't recognize them for what they are. Religion. I don't today consider myself a Christian, but obviously Christianity is an extremely important part of white culture, historically. For that reason, I believe that Christianity should be, in the very least, respected. I believe that even if you don't believe in Jesus, he deserves to be respected as part of our history and culture. I would like to say that unlike the ninjas who blame others for their problems, I do not blame black or even Jews for my failures in life. I also want to state that I am morally opposed to psychology. It is a Jewish invention and does nothing but invent diseases and tell people that they have problems when they don't. Now this is part scribbled out a little, and it's hard to see, but I'm going to try to read it. I am not fighting for what white people are, but what we have the potential to be. I don't need respect. I don't respect or feel pity for old white people or my elders, as they are the ones who let us get into this situation. Now, these are just scribblings. He gets a little bit more manic, a little bit more mad here in these last ones. Homosexuality doesn't exist. It is nothing but a fetish that has been turned into a sexuality by the Jews. This is why so many married men with children come out as gay. They obviously can perform normally. They just prefer men. Homosexuality should be illegal, or, and it cuts off here, reinstated as severe mental illness. Okay. Again, handwritten. This is right around the time he's going crazy. If he did go crazy, and we'll talk about that. One of my only regrets is that I was never able to fall in love. I want you to remember that. Now, this is a kid writing this. I don't know if he wrote this right before he shot those people or if he wrote this in prison. It's unclear because it's all put together as a compiled manuscript, a manifesto, and then a compiled manuscript. But think about this young kid. Now, you've heard his words, you've heard the way he speaks, you heard the way he writes, you've heard his ability to communicate with others. Crazy, not crazy, whatever you think of him, you can at least agree that he is somewhat intelligent. That if he had not have done those things, he had potential. He had potential in literary, he had potential in communication, he had potential to meet someone. He was a handsome guy. I mean, the haircut's probably got to go. But he wasn't a terribly ugly person. As you can see, he had a nice smile. And think about this. All this thrown away. All this potential gone. All of it gone. And you, of course, empathize with the victims who unknowingly were ambushed in a church service and shot to death, who met their demise in a very, very wicked way. A very, very satanic way. It almost seems like they were sacrificed. And I don't agree with it. I don't condone it. But think about this kid. Put yourself in his shoes. Look at how intelligent he was. And look at how victimized he felt. And I'm not asking you to do this because I want you to feel sorry for him or remend his sentence or ask the governor to commute his terms of imprisonment. I'm asking you to sympathize with his thoughts and his conditioning, because if you don't stoop down to his level and see eye to eye with the youth of this country, then there is going to be that race war that he wanted. The Turner Diaries are going to come true. His manifesto is going to come true. And as I say that, I say this, I read this one line that's jotted down differently than all the other lines in this book that he wrote, this manifesto that he has handwritten. As I say all that, I remind you that one of the most touching parts of all this is he said, one of my only regrets is that I was never able to fall in love. He never felt a woman's touch. He never felt the touch of someone who loved him as a counterpoint of equal romance or care, and he never will. He'll never feel the touch of someone who cares as much about him as he does about her. He'll never realize what it's like to hold someone. He will be an involuntary monastic. He will be an involuntary celibate. And if he is not protected in the federal system by white gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood, he will experience sexual punitive rape by the same races that he learned to despise. My only regret is that I wish I had fallen in love. And again, I'm not saying this to make you feel sorry for the kid. I'm saying this to let you know, boomers, Generation X, older millennials, if you don't listen to the Nick Fuenteses of the world, if you don't listen to the Patty Ramseys of the world, if you don't listen to what your white sons are saying and say, okay, Jimmy, that sounds a little bit racist, okay? Like, don't let anyone at my office know that you're talking like that, because I could literally lose my job at the firm. Fuck your firm. Fuck your job. Your child is the future, and he is having homicidal, not just homicidal, not just fucking auto-homicidal, arousal thoughts. He's not thinking about walking out and killing a black person. He is having tactical military homicidal ideations, which mean he is planning a war, an all-out war against other people, with his friends online, with the people around him. And he feels like he has no choice. Dylan wrote, people joke about prison rape without ever thinking about how sick it really is. It is a touchy subject, I know, but white nationalists need to confront it. I see so many white women wasting their beauty because they put no effort into how they dress. Now here's the last line. No one else has responsibility for what I have done. I planned and went about it completely alone. I repeat, do not try and punish other people for my actions, because you couldn't punish me. This is wrong and cruel. LastRhodesian.com. He had the wherewithal to write that. He had the wherewithal to care about other people, to seclude them from his punitive engagements with the government. If we don't start seeing eye to eye, if we don't start coming to a conclusion, what you're going to see, and the reason I put this flag up at the beginning of all this, is because what you saw in the 1860s American Civil War wasn't just North versus South. There were whole swaths of people in Boston who hated what America was coming to, and they wanted to fight for the South. There were whole groups of people called the Know-Nothings and the Say-Nothings in New York City who fought and said, fuck Abraham Lincoln, down with the Union. They hated the Irish coming off the boats. They hated the people who were infiltrating America. And these young people who are so online all the time now, who are always online, who are either going to get, it's not a question of whether or not they're going to get radicalized, especially if they're white. It's whether or not they're going to get radicalized left or right. It's whether or not you're going to get a Thomas Cook or a Dylan Roof. It's whether or not you're going to get the guy who shot Charlie Kirk or the guy who shot 12 black people in a supermarket in Buffalo. It's not whether or not these young people are going to get radicalized or not. It's which way, because they're always online and they're being force-fed propaganda by a Mossad unit that wants to see this country fail, that wants to see someone like Russia come in and aid our enemies from within, that wants to see the third temple be set up in Jerusalem and they be the center for holiness and excellency and the apex for civics and law. They increase the enviousness, the malicious envy that comes from minorities towards whites. They increase the rhetoric that goes around these 8chan, 4chan type chat circles and keeps young white men hating their environment. I want you older people to truly, truly listen to the younger people and understand that they look up their family tree, they look up their family history, and they say, wow, my grandfathers fought in the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, World War I, World War II. I am an American native. I'm an American nativist. And transversely, they look on the news and on Instagram and Snapchat, and they see that people who look like them, young white people, are being bullied, picked on, shot, raped, killed by gangs of blacks who are not just being called besmirchingly or punitively being called sub-IQ, but who are testing sub-IQ, who are behaving sub-IQ, who are enacting in their daily lives in sub-IQ ways, but yet still getting hired before them in DEI incentives. They're seeing the communities of Washington, D.C., where the founding fathers set up and looked at the Potomacs and Delaware River in Philadelphia and D.C. and Boston being overtaken by street-shitting IQ 90 Pajeets from India who are taking the IT jobs for some reason. And they're saying, hey, every person who jumps off this airport, every person who jumps off a plane at this airport is my enemy. Every black person I see is my enemy. And I'm telling you, you don't want that. Because, yes, remember 1860s in America. There was a civil war. But it started with skirmishes of violence in the streets, just like gangs of New York. And I want to play you something. I want to play you something that coincides with the first thing I said at the beginning of this program. I am America. It is all I have. I have no place else to go. And Bill the Butcher said, what is a native? A native is someone who is willing to lay down their life for the country, Amsterdam. I am a native.
That's the building of our country right there, Mr. Cutting. Americans are burning.
I don't see no Americans. I see trespassers. Irish hops do a job for a nickel what a nigger does for a dime and a white man used to get a quarter for.
What have they done? Name one thing they've contributed.
Votes.
Votes, you say? They vote how the Archbishop tells them, and who tells the Archbishop? Their king in the pointy hat what sits on his throne in Rome.
Bill's got mixed feelings as regards the Irish.
And there'll be a handsome price for each vote goes Tammany's way.
My father gave his life making this country what it is. Murdered by the British with all of his men on the 25th of July, Anno Domini 1814. You think I'm gonna help you befoul his legacy? By giving this country over to them was had no hand in the fighting for it? Why, because they come off a boat crawling with lice and begging you for soup?
That's the building of our country right there, Mr.
And that is the sentiment that you are seeing And that is the sentiment that you are seeing from our children. That is the sentiment. And that is the sentiment that you are seeing from our children. That is the sentiment that will continue into gang violence and civil war and will transform this country, will transfigure this country into something that you will not believe and will not want to be a part of. And I'm telling you, if you don't stop it now, it's going to be beyond your control very, very quickly. My name is Patty Ramsey. This is the American Sentinel.